At Sunday lunch I asked casually, "Did you pick up my prescription?" "The doctor said it's urgent." My dad said, "Oh, we used that money to buy your sister's new phone. She needed it for school." I stared at them. "Right. Then I guess you didn't read the warning label the pharmacist sent." My mom whispered, "Warning?" What I said next. Their faces went white. "Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, suffocating, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a disaster, or maybe, in our house, the kind that follows a breach of etiquette. My father, Michael, didn't look up from his plate. He sliced his steak with the precision of a surgeon, or perhaps just a man who believed that if he ignored a problem hard enough, it would cease to exist. My mother, Elizabeth, was already fluttering, rearranging the floral centerpiece, her nervous energy radiating off her like heat waves. "Natalie, don't be dramatic," Michael said finally without looking at me. "It's just medication. We'll get it next week." Chloe needed the camera kit for her vlog. "It's an investment in her future." "An investment," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes," he said, finally looking up, his eyes cold and flat. "An investment. Unlike your constant medical expenses." I looked at Chloe, my beautiful golden sister. She was 19, glowing with health and vitality, completely absorbed in her new phone, testing out angles for her next video. She didn't even hear us. She didn't have to. In this house she was the art on the wall, to be admired and protected. I was the drywall, the studs, the insulation, necessary for the structure to stand but invisible until something cracked. I stood up. My legs felt weak, a tremor running through my hands that I hid by clenching them into fists at my sides. It was a familiar sensation, the physical manifestation of the neurological condition I'd been managing in secret for months. But this time the shaking wasn't just fear. It was rage. A cold, hard rage that settled in my chest like a stone. "Where are you going?" Elizabeth asked, her voice shrill. "We haven't even had dessert." "I'm leaving," I said. My voice was steady, surprisingly so. "And I'm not coming back until you explain why a piece of technology is worth more to you than my health." "Natalie, sit down," Michael commanded. "You are making a scene." "No," I said. "I'm making a choice." I grabbed my keys from the counter. They felt heavy in my hand, heavier than they should. I walked to the door, my footsteps echoing on the pristine marble floors. I didn't look back. I knew what I would see if I did. My mother's anxious face, my father's angry one, and Chloe, still oblivious, still perfect, still the center of their universe. I got into my car and drove. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't go to a park to cry. I drove straight to the pharmacy. The drive was a blur of white lines and red taillights. My mind was racing, replaying the conversation, dissecting it, analyzing it like I would a blueprint. "We used that money to buy your sister's new phone." It wasn't just selfishness. It was a statement of value. My health, my survival was worth less than $2,800. When I reached the pharmacy, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my credit card out of my wallet. The total flashed on the screen, $2,450. It was my entire emergency fund. Every cent I'd saved from freelance projects, from skipping meals, from walking instead of taking the bus. I swiped the card. The machine beeped. Approved. I took the bag with the vials of medication. It felt light, insignificant for something that had just cost me my safety net. I walked back to my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I thought about the glass child syndrome. I'd read about it years ago in a psychology class. The sibling of a child with special needs, or in my case special status, who is looked through, never at. The child who is expected to be perfect, to be problem-free, to be invisible so the parents can focus on the one who shines. I had spent my entire life trying to be invisible. Trying to be low maintenance. Trying to be the good daughter who didn't need anything. And it had gotten me exactly nothing. I was transparent to them. But the thing about glass is that when it breaks, it becomes sharp. And I was done being smooth and transparent. I was ready to cut. I started the car. I wasn't going back to the house in Connecticut. I was going to my apartment in the city, the small studio I paid for myself, the one place where I was solid, real, visible. I had a plan. It wasn't a plan for revenge, not exactly. It was a plan for an audit. A structural assessment of the family I had been propping up for 23 years. I arrived at my apartment and locked the door behind me. The silence here was different. It wasn't the suffocating silence of the Connecticut house. It was a silence I had chosen. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the family's shared cloud drive, The one I managed because my father couldn't be bothered to learn how to organize files. I started looking. Not as a daughter but as an architect inspecting a building for faults. And I found them. Cracks in the foundation. Discrepancies in the ledgers. Money moving in ways it shouldn't. I saw the withdrawal for Chloe's camera kit. $2,800. And right next to it, a transfer from my own savings account to the joint family account, labeled utilities. I had paid the electric bill that month. I had paid for the lights that illuminated their perfect dinner. I kept digging. I went back 5 years. And there was a loss. A massive, gaping hole in the family finances. $185,000. Gone. The date coincided with a tech investment boom that had crashed spectacularly. My father had invested. And he had lost. I sat back in my chair. The pieces were falling into place. The tension in the house, the obsession with appearances, the refusal to spend money on anything that didn't contribute to the facade of wealth. They weren't just selfish. They were broke. And they were terrified. I looked at the medication box on my desk. The warning label stared back at me. Mandatory state reporting for hereditary conditions. I read it again. And then I read the fine print. Failure to treat. Neglect. Investigation. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. You're being dramatic. The pharmacist is exaggerating. Come home, we have guests tonight. You need to handle the catering. I looked at the message. Handle the catering. Not, are you okay? Not, did you get your medicine? Just a demand for service. A demand for the invisible daughter to come back and make things seamless again. I didn't reply. I opened a new document on my computer. I titled it Audit. And I started typing. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I wasn't just a glass child. I was the inspector. And I was about to condemn the building. The next morning I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The anxiety that usually buzzed in my chest like a trapped insect was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I took my medication, the injection stinging as it went in, a reminder of what was at stake. My hand was steady. I pulled up the family calendar. Aunt Catherine's birthday was next week. Catherine, the sister my father never spoke of. The one who had married a forensic accountant and moved to the city, refusing to play the status games that consumed the rest of the family. I hadn't seen her in years, but I knew where she lived. And I knew she would understand. I printed out the financial records I had found. I printed out my medical history, the diagnosis I had received months ago and hidden, the prescription rejection notice. I put it all in a neat folder. Then I got dressed. Not in the soft, blending-in clothes I usually wore to family events, but in my sharpest suit, the one I wore for client presentations. I drove to Catherine's brownstone. She opened the door, surprised to see me. She looked like my father, but softer, her eyes sharp and intelligent. Natalie, she said. What are you doing here? I need to hire you, I said. Or rather, I need to consult with you. She looked at the folder in my hand, then at my face. She stepped back and opened the door wide. Come in. We sat in her living room, surrounded by books and art, a stark contrast to the empty white surfaces of my parents' house. I laid out the documents. I walked her through the timeline. The lost investment. The years of financial tightrope walking. The neglect. The hammer kit. Catherine listened without interrupting. She flipped through the pages, her expression grim. When she reached the medication warning label, she stopped. She read it, then looked up at me. Do you know what this means? She asked. It means if I don't treat it, the state gets involved, I said. It means more than that, she said. Look at the insurance policy. She pulled up a file on her own computer. It was a copy of my father's life insurance policy, an old one taken out decades ago. The premiums were low, the payout massive. Millions. It was the only real asset the family had left. The only thing standing between them and total ruin if Michael died. Read the exclusion rider, Catherine said, pointing to a paragraph in tiny print. I read it. Policy void if any direct descendant is diagnosed with a hereditary neurological condition prior to the age of 25. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Hereditary. Neurological. My condition. He knew, I whispered. He knew if I was diagnosed, if it went on my official record, the policy would be voided. That's why he didn't want me to get treatment. That's why he wouldn't pay for the meds. He wasn't saving $2,400, Catherine said, her voice hard. He was saving $5 million. He was willing to let you suffer, to let you risk permanent damage to protect his retirement fund. I felt sick. Physically sick. It wasn't just neglect. It was a calculation. My brain health versus his financial security. And he had chosen the money. And the warning label, Catherine continued. The state reporting. If the pharmacy flags this as critical non-compliance, it goes into a database. A state database, which the insurance companies monitor. So by not paying for the meds, I started. He triggered the very thing he was trying to avoid, Catherine finished. Or he's about to. If that flag hasn't hit the system yet, it will soon. I looked at the papers. The evidence of my father's betrayal. It was methodical. It was cold. And it was devastating. What do? I asked. Catherine looked at me. You finish the audit. You take this to them. You show them that you know. And you watch them crumble. She stood up and went to a desk, pulling out a checkbook. She wrote a check and handed it to me. It was for $5,000. For the medication, she said. And for whatever comes next. You're not alone in this, Natalie. You never were. We let the glass get too thick. Take the check. I hugged her, holding on tight. For the first time in my life, I felt solid. I felt seen. I drove back to my apartment, the folder on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. I had the truth now. I had the leverage. And I had a plan. I waited until Sunday. The day of the weekly family dinner. The day everyone would be there. I walked into the house, the key my mother had demanded I return still on my ring. The house was quiet, the air conditioning humming. They were in the dining room just starting lunch. Natalie! Elizabeth exclaimed, half rising from her chair. We were so worried. You didn't answer any texts. Are you ready to apologize? I walked to the table. I didn't sit. I placed the folder on the white marble in front of my father. I'm not here to apologize, I said. I'm here to update the ledger. Michael looked at the folder, then at me. What is this? It's the cost of doing business, I said. Open it. He opened the folder. He saw the bank statements, the medical records, the copy of the insurance policy with the rider highlighted in yellow. His face went gray. He choked out. You went through my private files. I manage your cloud drive, Dad, I said. Remember? You asked me to, because you couldn't be bothered. He looked at Chloe, then at Elizabeth. This is a misunderstanding. Is it? I asked. Is the $185,000 loss a misunderstanding? Is the clause that voids your $5 million policy if I get diagnosed a misunderstanding? Elizabeth gasped. She looked at Michael. Michael, is that true? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and hatred. You selfish little. He hissed. I did this for this family. For you. If that policy voids, we have nothing. Nothing. We are destitute. Do you understand that? So my health was the price of admission? I asked. My brain was the collateral? It was a minor condition, he shouted, standing up. You could have managed it. A little dizziness. Some tremors. You could have lived with it. But no, you had to be dramatic. You had to go to specialists. You had to get a paper trail. I have a degenerative neurological disorder, Dad, I said, my voice rising for the first time. If I don't treat it, I lose motor function. I lose cognitive ability. I lose me. And you knew that. You knew it and you didn't care. I care about keeping a roof over our heads, he screamed. I care about Chloe's future. She has potential. She's going places. You're just an architect. You draw lines on paper. She is a star. There was the truth, naked and ugly. I was the worker bee. Chloe was the queen. I was expendable. Well, I said, my voice dropping back to that cold, steady tone. I have some news for you. The warning label. What about it? He snapped. The one on the medication box. The one you ignored. It says that critical non-compliance with treatment for a hereditary condition triggers a mandatory state audit. He froze. Because you didn't pick up the meds, I said. The pharmacy system flagged it. Automatically. It went to the State Department of Health yesterday. I got the notification this morning. I pulled a letter from my pocket and tossed it on the table. They've opened an investigation into medical neglect. And because it's a hereditary condition. I looked at Chloe. They've flagged all minors in the household for mandatory screening. Chloe looked up from her phone, her eyes wide. What does that mean? It means, I said, looking at Michael, that the state is going to test Chloe. And if she has the gene, which is highly likely, it goes on her permanent record. Immediately. Michael sank back into his chair. He looked like he had been shot. The insurance company gets alerted to state audits, I said. It's automatic. So not only is the policy voided, you just made your golden child uninsurable. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a glass house shattering one pane at a time. You ruined us, Elizabeth whispered. No, I said. You ruined yourselves. I just turned on the lights. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, firmly. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. I drove away. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't going back. I was free. I was solid. And for the first time in my life I was building something that wouldn't break. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings and silence. The foreclosure notice on my parents' house came 2 weeks later. The insurance investigation was swift and brutal. The policy was voided for fraud and non-disclosure. Michael faced potential charges, but mostly he faced ruin. Chloe tested positive for the gene. She was furious not at the disease but at the blemish on her record. She blamed me for a week, then she blamed our parents. When the money dried up, so did her influencer dreams. She had to get a job. A real one. She moved out, bitter and disillusioned. I stayed in my apartment. I took my medication. The tremors stopped. The dizziness faded. My mind was sharp, clear. I worked on my designs. I started a new project, a community center with walls of glass, but glass that was reinforced, strong, unbreakable. One evening I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights. I thought about my family. I didn't hate them. Hate takes energy. I just felt distant. Like they were characters in a book I had finished reading. I wasn't a glass child anymore. I was the architect of my own life. And the foundation was solid.